Last week, where I invited all my committee chairs from all the committees that we have on the board to come to discuss how we can best maybe improve or change some of the ways that we've been having committee meetings, so that maybe we could take some of the public's hearing items that are on the public hearing agenda and have the public hearing sessions on specific items at the committee levels, so that the committee that has specific public hearing items would then become also a public hearing session. But in order for that to happen, in order for that to take place, it was important for the committee chairs to understand, and that's why we had this meeting to discuss this. It was important that since you have a public hearing, anytime you have a public hearing, you need to have a quorum. A quorum here, like for instance, on a monthly basis, we have to have a quorum of our board members. At the committee level, we'd have to have a quorum of the committee. And after much discussion, and this had come from, some recommendations that were made at the executive level first. We had talked with several members of our board that had some ideas from what other boards have done in the past, and what other boards are doing in other parts of the city. So we took that into consideration and we discussed it amongst ourselves, but the consensus that I sensed, from everybody that was there, and all the committee chairs were present except for one that was legitimately excused for specific reasons, but everybody showed up, which I was very, very thankful. I really thank all the committee chairs for participating in this really unprecedented event, because we never did this before. And the consensus was that at this time, we really could not guarantee any of the committees, especially the ones that have very, very large or important items like land use, right, transportation, public safety, the liquor license committee. We couldn't come to a consensus that we would be able to guarantee at all times that if a public hearing item were going to be held at a committee level, that we would be able to have a quorum. It might happen, but it might not. So that would then present, a bit of a logistical problem, because then you would have a hearing that wouldn't have a quorum, and you would have to come back to the full meeting again. Some items, as we all know, are on a time clock that have to be voted on, and they can't wait. So this would then be a burden on the applicants or petitioners at that point. So that particular situation was tabled at this time until we get a better understanding of how the committees need to work together to bring the committee members, not just the committee chairs, but as many of the participants in committees, and everybody on the committee board is assigned to a committee. So the question is, how do we get all the committee participants, right, members of certain committees, how do we get them all to make sure that they come to all the committee meetings? Okay?
Enforce
now,
the
you
attendance
can't just
rules.
go ahead and force people to do it. And there's no penalty, if you don't come to a committee meeting, that you're off, or you get some kind of points off, or absentee deductions. You don't have that. Bylaws doesn't say anything about that, and we've never, as a board, passed any resolutions to that regard. Well, it was discussed a couple of years ago. There was a lot of discussion about somehow finding ways to get people more involved in the committee process. But that's something that needs still further discussion, and maybe some recommendations that are going to be coming down hopefully in the future, but it's not something that we can foresee happening right now. So at this time, we're going to stay with public hearings, all items on public hearings at the monthly public hearing sessions as we have presently. They're going to stay the same. The other item that was discussed was what we call freelance motions. For nobody want to call them that. And this is just an item of where sometimes motions are made in goodwill toward the end of meetings. And these motions usually maybe are requesting a recommendation of one kind, a recommendation for particular organizations who are applying for RFPs or making some requests to agencies in the city, legitimate and valid, requests. However, the feeling is, and I think the general consensus here that I got back from everyone was that it would be better if those requests for motions to support recommendations, whatever that item is, that it be first vetted through the committee process. If we're going to use committees, and committees are going to become functional, then all these items, all these requests, and whatever they may be, probably would be better off if they went through committee, were discussed, and then the committee chair would come back with recommendations to approve or not to approve. So that was a discussion that we had at the listening session. I thought it was very, very helpful, and hopefully we'll have a few more in the future like that. The other item here that we have was that recently, and help me if I don't have all the details on this, but there was an announcement made by Mayor Bloomberg recently to build state-of-the-art conversion technology facilities to convert waste to clean energy. And the problem with that is that it sounds all like a good idea, and they want to do all this conversion and recycling of refuse, but that it would involve some specifics that are detrimental to the communities, especially residential communities, where these
It's an incinerator.
particular centers would be, conversion centers would be placed, and incinerators. And one of those sites that was targeted was the Brooklyn Union Gas Company on Varick and Lombardy Street, which is right in our district. And we feel, the executive committee that was polled, along with the chair of the environmental committee, that this would be very hazardous to our community, dangerous to our community, and we vociferously feel that we are against any kind of incinerator-type conversion technology center in our community. We've had a history of incinerators, we've had a history of sewage, we've had a history of transfer stations. We know the history that we have in our community of the garbage and the toxic issues over the years that we've been fighting with since God knows how long, I mean the years. And this would be another detriment to that. I have it. All right here. And so I want to share with you our proposed resolution of Community Board 1 regarding a resolution to oppose the siting of the proposed facility to convert waste. And it reads as follows. Whereas the City of New York, with the Department of Sanitation, has released a request for proposals to allegedly build state-of-the-art facilities to convert waste to clean energy as part of Plan New York City, Plan NYC, whereas a proposed site is located in Community Board 1 at Varick Avenue and Lombardy Street, whereas the proposed site in Community Board 1 is located directly adjacent to residential homes, housing developments, and in a business zone, and whereas another proposed site located in Community Board number 2, Queens, is directly across the Newton Creek, mirrored across the waterway, within close proximity to Brooklyn Community Board number 1, and whereas Greenpoint and Williamsburg top New York's list for having the most garbage trucks roaming neighborhood streets, 19 of the city's 58 waste transfers are located in CB1, handling almost 40% of the New York City waste, whereas such a facility would substantially increase truck traffic to and from said facility, whereas a recent study shows there is an increase 355% in pollutant matter floating in the air when transfer stations are open and operating. And whereas Community Board number 1 has a high rate of asthma cases, according to North Brooklyn Asthma Environmental Consortium study conducted in from 1995 to 2003 for Williamsburg and Bushwick, the rate is 60 times worse than any part of the USA. And whereas Dr. John C. LaRosa, president of State University of New York Downstate Medical Center, in a report titled Brooklyn Community Health, Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Disease, states that for residents of Brooklyn, a borough with a relatively young population, the prevalence of COPD is still a major cause of sickness and death. The study also notes that rates of chronic bronchitis for persons over 45 in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Bushwick have increased. Whereas the district's air is contaminated due to the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway emissions, Williamsburg Bridge traffic, Brooklyn's largest bus terminal, waste transfer stations, toxic ecological footprints left over from the industrial past. And whereas the Community Board Number 1's district lacks green space, the citywide average for open space is 3.5 acres per 1,000 residents. Our district ranks near bottom of the list in terms of open space per capita with 0.6 acres per 1,000 residents. And whereas the proposed plan would begin operating by processing 450 tons of waste per day, and whereas Community Board Number 1 has more than its fair share of waste transfer stations, sanitation garages, and salt piles, and whereas Community Board 1 was negatively impacted for decades by the DOS Greenpoint incinerator, and whereas Community Board Number 1 has suffered from many negative environmental impacts and facilities, for example, an underground oil spill estimated 17 to 30 million gallons of oil, benzene, naphtha, and other carcinogenic chemicals pollute a 55-acre, 25-foot deep swath of soil. A newly discovered plume of toxic underground material found near the proposed facility site, the Newton Creek Water Pollution Control Plant, and the barging of sludge.
We got the
Be it
sludge.
resolved that Community Board 1 vehemently opposes the siting of a proposed waste handling facility at Varick Avenue and Lombardy
These are
Street,
complex
Brooklyn
sentences.
Union Gas Company, National Grid property, and 57th Avenue along Newton Creek, that's the Phelps Dodge Refinery. As such, facilities would negatively impact the health of quality of life for all who reside, work, or commute in Greenpoint and Williamsburg.
Very good.